The curious double life of the Zodiac. The Zodiac is a divination tool backed by countless years of careful observation of the stars by a special class of highly specialized astronomers who read the omens of the celestial heavens. We have dozens of ancient texts from astrologers who try to capture their best categorized interpretations of heavenly messages. The Zodiac was not handed to humanity by the gods. The Hellenistic zodiac, with its rulership and exaltation and multitude of specialized techniques, was an aggregation of astrological traditions that the Greeks encountered in Egypt, Babylon, and elsewhere throughout Asia Minor, North Africa, and the Indian subcontinent. The Greek scholars filtered the raw information received from Chaldea, Egypt, and beyond into the already robust Greek astrological, theological, philosophical, and mythological traditions, much of it Proto-Indo-European sky mythology with Celtic roots. The Homeric hymns and subsequent works of Hesiod, Pausanias, Aeschylus, Pseudo-Apollodorus, and many other mythographers were embedded into the structure of the Hellenistic zodiac. The horoscopic astrological tradition, using the zodiac as a divinatory school, has never been universally accepted as valid or useful. It has been attacked at its theoretical roots since its inception. But it is important to understand that the horoscopic use of astrology was not the whole of the astrological tradition. It was a latecomer among methods of assessing the omens of the heavens. The parens are a method of tracking the fixed stars at their rising and falling times throughout the year. Stars that rise with the sun, or heliacal rising stars, each have a particular story and signification. The decans are a solar-based system that assigns 36 divisions to the wheel of the year, with narrative stories that arise from the season and 3 different planetary energies. The mansions of the moon are a lunisolar scheme that tracks the moon through 28 fixed star cluster divisions of the ecliptic wheel. The essential structure of the Hellenistic zodiac tells a specific story, a universal story that tracks the life force of the planet through the seasons. The story is transposed when used in horoscopic astrology, but the essential structure stands on its own as a thema mundi, or a chart of the world, which is functional as something of an almanac. A great deal of mythology sits outside the 12 signs of the zodiac. There are 88 generally recognized constellations in the sky. The cult of Dionysus was a secretive goddess cult. Dionysus was the guardian of women's mysteries. Dionysus was a dying and rising god, a particular archetypal male figure who was linked directly to the growth and death of the vegetative and fungal worlds. The mystery religions were ritualized dramas that included a great deal of hazing, drug use, and secret initiations intended to bring the initiate past their fear of death into an embrace of their own mortality. Christian writers took a strong stance against astrology. Here are several quotes by early church fathers from earlychurchhistory.org. These may not always mean what they appear to mean. Recognitions of Clement, 10:12, from circa 220 AD. The astrologer's error does not proceed from their unskillfulness in the art, but from the inconsistency of the whole system. But we who have learned the reason of this mystery know the cause, since Having freedom of will, we sometimes oppose our desires and sometimes yield to them. And therefore, the issue of human goings is uncertain because it depends on freedom of will. And this is why ignorant astrologers have invented to themselves the talk about climacterics as the refuge for their uncertainties when they wrongly predict. Tatian the Syrian, 120 to 180 CE, in his Address to the Greeks, 8.9 in 170, wrote, "Under the influence of demons, men form the material of their apostasy. For having shown them a plan of the position of the stars, like dice players, they introduce fate, a flagrant injustice. For the delineation of the zodiacal circle is the work of their so-called gods. But we are superior to fate. Instead of wandering demons, we have learned to know one Lord who wanders not." Lactantius, circa 240 to 320, advisor to Constantine, wrote in Divine Institutes 2:16.17, "Demons were the inventors of astrology and of soothsaying and divination, and those productions which are called oracles and necromancy, and the art of magic and whatever other evil practices these men exercise, either openly or in secret." The Christian establishment had serious problems with astrology from the beginning. The exoteric or outward-facing reasons for opposing astrology were relatively simple, and their ideas were not new to the Christian movement. Astrology implies immutable fate, especially in the Greek tradition. The church would not have a reason to proselytize and evangelize if the destiny of man's soul was already set in the stars. The church needed the masses to believe that humanity has just enough free will to choose faith in Jesus. We can choose to be in good graces with him and be counted amongst his horde, thereby achieving salvation and justify the church's existence. Or we can be damned to hell, a very pagan concept turned very dark. If people thought their whole life was fated and beyond control, why commit to the cult? Beyond that little bit of free will, the church would have cared less if you were a pauper or a high priest. However, the zodiac was fundamentally a religious symbol. Jesus' birth was the fulfillment of a stellar prophecy. The three magi who came to his birth were astrologers. John the Baptist was a Sabaean priest. He confirmed that Jesus was in fact the Messiah. Jesus was a Nazarene Jew of a royal Parthian/Egyptian bloodline. Zodiacs were a normal feature on the tiled floors of Nazarene synagogues. It was common for the Greek god Helios to be displayed in the center of these Nazarene zodiacs. A zodiac from a 5th century Common Era synagogue at Hamat Tiberias. Zodiacs were a common feature of early Christian churches until the 11th or 12th centuries, and also found in synagogues of certain Judaic sects. This appears to be a contradiction until you realize that the zodiac itself was a religious symbol that is related to, but not the same as its use in horoscopic astrology. The symbol itself represented divine order. It was calendrical and served as an almanac, providing a link to farming and agriculture, the same feminine territory of the mystery cults, whose patron was Dionysus. The vocal protestations of early church fathers warning of the evils of astrology were not heeded by the builders of churches. The zodiac was being used as a Christian symbol until the 11th century and beyond in some places. This is where our story is nuanced. Until now, no one could make sense of this. Most of the warnings of these early church fathers were specifically against horoscopic astrology, or the use of astrology for divinatory omens or for magic. Augustine leveled criticism against astrology's basic conceptual structure, citing the example of twins whose fates were always different. The book of Genesis makes it clear that the stars were placed in the sky by divine command. We need to question which audiences Augustine and all of the church fathers were addressing with their missives. We must take a hermeneutical stance. Some may have been addressing the intellectual community at large, both pagan and Christian, since astrology had its detractors outside of the Christian cult. Others were clearly directing their comments to the flock, the established yet fractured Christian cults, and not the public at large. We can be certain that horoscopic astrology became a liability to the early church over time. The words of Tatian the Syrian, previously quoted, provide a clue as to the actual loophole that Christianity may have been hoping to exploit. For the delineation of the zodiacal circle is the work of their so-called gods. But we are superior to fate, and instead of the wandering demons, we have learned to know one Lord who wanders not. The work of modern scholar David Matheson tells us that the constellation known as Hercules, which sits well above the ecliptic, is symbolic of a great sky god, be it Zeus, Jehovah, or any other equivalent. This constellation is directly above the constellation Ophiuchus, the snake handler. Ophiuchus' foot is barely touching the ecliptic. He is the messianic intermediary in between the zodiacal ecliptic and the sky god. Therefore, he fits in perfectly as the Son of God. This is also a reference of Dionysus, the son of Zeus. Hercules is superior, or above, the band of demons, or demonic planets which wander on the ecliptic. The fixed stars do not wander. Tatian the Syrian thus tells us that the wandering stars are demonic and unreliable. Rather than looking to this polytheistic pantheon of gods, we can look to the Lord, the constellation Hercules, standing in for Yahweh as our guide. We can dispense with the omens of the ecliptic and place our faith in the fixed stars of Hercules. Given this context, Tatian's admonition may be telling us that monotheists should only be looking to fixed stars rather than horoscopic astrology. Jesus was the fulfillment of a stellar prophecy. He was born a shepherd and became a fisher of men. The transition from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces. In the details of several ancient zodiacs, we can see that the Jesus figure in the center is painting vaguely either to Aries or the spring equinoctial point at 0 degrees Aries or to the sign of Pisces. Early Christianity was fractured from the beginning and underwent centuries of internal doctrinal development and purification. We now know that there are many books of Christian gospel or scriptures written close to the alleged lifetime of Jesus, which were banned, destroyed, and repressed, some completely now lost. These texts were theoretically valid and provided core principles for some early Christian sects, only to be labeled as heretical by the Council of Nicaea or other bodies. The vilification of horoscopic astrology is a part of the story of doctrinal purification. Many heresies could be punished by death or torture, so it can be quite difficult to track down exactly what happened in many cases. Dead or deplatformed heretics and their burned books are often difficult threads to pull on.